Hello and welcome to Everyone Has a Story podcast. I'm going to share with you one of my most memorable days ever. Back in the late 80s, I was doing a business trip to Boston. And this was before the internet. This was before, cell phones. And so I looked in the paper, and sure enough, being a big sports fan, the Celtics were in town my very first night there. So I'm going to make my way to the Boston Garden to see if I can get myself a ticket for the game. And just by chance, they're playing the New York Knicks. And so I'm thinking, oh, geez, this is going to be a great game. Star power galore. But I had no ticket. And so the only way I was going to do is get there and either scalp one or find one at the box office, which I knew was highly unlikely. So anyway, I fly into Boston. I get to the hotel, and there's a ton of people checking in at the same time. So I look over and I see the concierge. He's all by himself. So I walk over to him. I introduce myself. I said, any way I can get a ticket to the Celtics game tonight? He looked at me and he goes, boy, I don't know, but let me see what I can do. What room are you in? I said, well, I haven't checked in yet. I'm just standing in line over there. He goes, well, tell me your name. So I gave him my name. He goes, if I can find you a ticket, you got to be able to react very, very quickly because it's already like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I said, sure, no problem. So I barely get to my room. My phone is ringing. So I pick it up, and sure enough, it's the guy at the concierge desk. He goes, I have a ticket for you, but you got to come down right now. I said, I'm there. So I grab my jacket. It's middle of winter in Boston. It's cold. So I go down there, meet the guy, and he goes, let me introduce you to Hank. Hank is one of our all-time favorite people here. He's a ticket broker, and just by chance, he has one more ticket to tonight's game. So we shake hands, and he says, I think you'll enjoy this ticket. You're going to be right on the floor. And I'm thinking, geez, I'm going to get to sit on the parquet floor of the Boston Garden. So now my heart skipped, and I'm thinking, there's probably no way at this time I can afford this ticket. So of course I asked, how much is the ticket? He goes, you know what? You'll be just fine. I think he charged me $30 for that ticket. And right now I'm in hog heaven. So as he's walking away, after I thanked him a million times, he's walking away, and I asked the concierge, what's the best way to get to the game? And about that time, Hank heard me, and he says, well, if you don't mind riding with an old man, you can ride with me because my last stop is right across the street from the garden. So I took him up on his offer. We're driving, and this guy is probably late 70s, early 80s, and this guy is a wealth of knowledge with anything that had to do with New England sports. We were talking Patriots football, Boston Red Sox, Boston Bruins, the Celtics, you name it. I mean, this guy was giving me the lowdown on anything local that had to do with Boston sports. So we get to his last stop, which is a bar right across the street from the garden. He says, you still got some time. Let's go have a cocktail. So we walk inside, and sure enough, just like in the Cheers bar, he walks in and everybody turns their head and says, Hank, how are you? So Hank says hello to everybody, and he introduces me as Roger from Chicago. After they booed me because I'm from Chicago, I'm now everybody's best friend. We order a drink. And then as my glass started getting lower, the bartender brings me another drink. And I said, well, thank you. What do I owe the thank you in this one? He goes, oh, you're a guest now. And he couldn't remember my name, so he just called me Chicago. So for about the next 2 or 3 hours, I wasn't known as Roger, I was known as Chicago. So anyway, I'm making new friends. So as I started to leave, because now I'm starting to feel very little pain, I need to go because I want to enjoy the game too, because I got a ticket to sit right on the parquet floor. So I went to the bartender and said, let me buy everybody around. He goes, I'll buy everybody around, but I'm not going to take your money because your money's not good here. So I'm thinking, this night can't get any better. So I get to the game. It's still about a half hour before the game starts. I'm on the floor. I mean, I'm right underneath the basket. I mean, I can't even get any closer to these guys. But I notice that the seat next to me is empty. So I'm watching. I'm looking at all the banners up on the hanging up, with all the championship. Back with this big cigar sitting in the stands. I just can't believe where I'm at. And about that time, I see this guy walking towards me. He's got like 5 beers in his hand. He's got like 5 hot dogs. He's got 2 bags of popcorn and probably a bunch of other food. But he keeps looking at the chair right next to me. but he looks homeless. I'm thinking, boy, this guy must be just working here or something like that. But anyway, he's struggling to get all this here, and he finally sits down right next to me. He introduces himself, and he's starting to lay down all of his food that he has, all of his beers, and he looks at me and he goes, "Where are my manners?" He goes, "Can I offer you a beer and a hot dog?" I'm thinking, what? So this guy is talking to me all night. He hands me a beer, hands me a hot dog. And I think before the end of the night, I had 2 of his beers and I had probably 3 of his hot dogs. But this guy told me the story about how he and his dad had season tickets to the Boston Celtics. They've had them for years, and his seats are at the very, very top of the rafters up there. His dad couldn't make the game. He didn't want to come by himself, so he goes and he scalps his 2 tickets. And as he's walking away, some guy hands him free of charge this ticket that he's now sitting next to me. He goes, "I got a pocket full of money. So what do? I go buy all these beers, hot dogs, popcorn, you name it. And I'm not going to eat it all. I don't know why I was thinking. So here, let me share it with you." So the whole night we're talking sports fans. We're sitting right there. We're probably getting drenched with sweat from the players because we're so damn close to field or to the court. And then as the game ends, I feel like I've got my new best friend. I'm walking away and I asked him how to get to the best way to get back. He goes, "Well, you're not going to get a cab around here. It's going to be too crowded. Why don't you just go to the train station? Your train station will take you right to your hotel." But I didn't know which train to take. So he goes, "I'll tell you what, I'll show you where to go. But on the way back, I have a friend who manages this tavern across the street from the train station. Let's go see if he's working." So sure enough, he's working. The guy now is buying us pitchers of beer. We don't have to worry about anything because it's coming right from his friend, the manager of the place. So now really I am feeling absolutely no pain. I don't even know if I can even see straight. The guy sees that I'm not doing really well because I've had maybe 1 or 2 too many drinks. He goes, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to take your train all the way to your stop just to make sure you get to their hotel." Wow. So he gets me all the way back to my hotel. I can't thank him enough. And I wake up the next morning thinking, can anybody in sports who's a fan like me, can they top that day? I mean, that was probably one of the best days as a sports fan that you could ever think of. So I tell that story because today we're going to talk about today. What does today mean? I hear people all the time talking about how I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to make it my best day ever. Well, yeah, that lasts maybe 2 days in a row, and then all of a sudden something happens, right? Life gets in the way. So what is it about today? Why are we so not even thinking about today? Why do we put today away and we always think about our past, what we could have done better, what we could have done, what really happened? And then we jump right into the future. Okay, this is where I'm going to be. This is what I want to do. This is where I'm going to go. But they always forget about living today. And every day they go by, they keep thinking about tomorrow or reliving yesterday, but they can't really enjoy today like what I did when I went to Boston. So that's what we're going to talk about today with my guest, Barry Gottlieb. Barry, welcome and thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here. I love that story. I mean, that was great.
Isn't that a great story?
Yes, a great story.
Well, and Barry, I know that you know a lot about today, and we're going to have you share that with us here in a minute, but let me introduce Barry. Barry is the founder of The Winner's Edge. He's a success coach. He's an author of many books, but the book that we're going to talk about today is TGIT, Ticket, Thank God It's Today. And I can't think of a better person to talk about this because now that we've become friends, Barry, I have to say, I look forward to our conversation probably more than most conversations I've had my whole life. I really appreciate you and what you give me every time that we have those conversations. So Barry, why don't you do a little bit deeper dive on your introduction and tell us a little bit about you?
Well, Roger, thank you. Amazing story, amazing introduction. To just share with anybody that's listening, what I got the most out of when I listened to your story, Roger, was this incredible sense of gratitude that has carried with you from that night at the garden all the way to today. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. And I have sort of the same kind of sense of gratitude. Mine fast forward to every single day. My background is I started out a young man that wanted to make an impact, a difference in the world. And I decided the way to do that would be to go into teaching. And I decided, okay, if I'm going to go into teaching, how can I best have an impact? And I said, well, really, if I want to have a valuable impact, I need to get to children when they're young. So I got into elementary education, early childhood education, and fast forward, I got my degrees in that. I became a school principal. I got a job teaching at Santa Fe Community College. I got a job teaching at the University of Florida in the College of Education. And I thought that life just could not be better. And I too was a sports junkie. At the time, there was this game that was very popular called racquetball, and I had gotten good enough at it that I was a professional racquetball player. I was also a student of the martial arts for 9 years, and I thought, man, I am living the life. Here I am, the University of Florida, teaching, loving everything. And then one day, I needed to sit in front of a doctor, an oncologist, and he sat across his desk from me. And now let me just to make it clear, I was feeling great, but I had had an incident the year before where they had removed something from my body and said it was cancer. They said it was gone. And now fast forward a year later, I'm sitting with this oncologist again, and he looks at me and he says, I'm sure it was very hard for anybody to say, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you've got 3 months, 6 at the most, to live. And I thought, that's impossible. I mean, my life is so good. How can this be happening? And he explained to me, well, and again, this is the 70s, and he's explaining to me, you have this thing called that when we catch it early enough on the skin, we excise it and it's done. But once it gets in your blood, it is one of the fastest spreading cancers that you have. And unfortunately, Barry, what's going to happen is that 3 to 6 months, it's going to spread to your liver, your brain, different organs in your body. So you need to get your affairs in order. And of course, I was in disbelief. I thought I was like living in a bad movie, and it hadn't all sunk in really deep to me. And he looks at me and he says, now look, if I can tell that this is a shock to you, he goes, but I want to let you know that there are many patients like you that unfortunately are in the same situation. They've all been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And some of these patients, what they've done is that they've created these little groups where they get together and sort of that bucket list kind of thing. And that Tim McGraw song, I believe it's Tim McGraw, and a bull named Fu Manchu, live like you're dying kind of thing. And he tells me, if you want to join one of these groups, what they do is they go out and they do everything they would not have done if it weren't for this diagnosis that they have. And I thought about it, and I left, and I went home, and I thought about it, and I go, look, I don't need to join some group to do this. That's the best advice that I could ever get. And that advice is, whether it's 3 months, whether it's 6 months, I am just going to make the most out of every single day. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to thank God for another day. Well, happily, I'm still here. Okay, we're talking almost 50 years ago, and happily, I'm still here. But in that time, I have made it my point to have this appreciation, this gratitude for each and every day. And TGIT, basically TIGIT, TGIT, TIGIT became my mantra. It's sort of a reminder to appreciate the now and the moment. And in a lot of my speaking engagements, when I share this story about this unfortunate diagnosis, I also say to people, look, I have to share something with you. I mean, and this is the truth. You don't need an oncologist to sit there and tell you you're going to die. See, because we are all going to die. The question is not whether or not you're going to die at a young age or an old age, because, some of the saddest people that I've ever met are people that have never lived. Okay. They've just existed. They've existed in the anxieties of things in the past that depress them, or the things that might happen in the future. And as you were saying, Roger, from your story, they fail to appreciate today. And so I say to people, look, you're going to die. You don't need an oncologist to tell you what you may not have the choice of where, when, how your death is going to occur. But you always, if you choose to, you always have a choice of whether or not you're going to live and how you're going to live in the moment. And so that's, here I am many years later. Since then, I left teaching, got into business. My partners and I built a very successful $75 million company. We sold it, and then I started doing coaching, mentoring for individuals and for companies, really focused on how to have a better day, a better life. And people sometimes say to me, well, how does that tie into business, Barry? How can you be a business coach? And I say to them, well, look, what's amazing is from my perspective, I didn't know anything about business. I was a teacher, but when I got into business, I said, well, I'm going to do everything that I learned to do when I was a teacher, and that's learn everything I can to be a good businessman. So I sought out the best mentors in the world. Back in those days, we didn't have the internet, as you're saying. So I had to hop on planes, go to seminars, listen to these people, take what they taught me, take it and apply it in our company. Some of it worked, some of it didn't work, but enough of it worked that we became very successful. But all along the way, I also always had this thing in my mind that if you want to be happy, okay, happiness doesn't come from success, okay? It's the opposite. Success comes from being happy. And if I can help people in each company that I go into and do mentoring or training for, because I do leadership training, I do sales training, I do, company culture, emotional intelligence, all that. But really, truly, what I go there to do is to teach the people that work in those companies how to take it, how to enjoy every day. And if they can enjoy every day, this amazing thing happens in those companies. The productivity goes up. When people start to enjoy and appreciate and have the sense of gratitude like you have for that story, we need to have a sense of gratitude every day. If we got up, okay, that's one thing you can write in your journal that you're grateful for. Here I am, okay? And pretty much that's what I've been doing. That's what I continue to do. I wrote books about it, and I enjoy my life. I take it every day.
Well, we're going to talk about your book here in a second, but you have one of the best stories to tell. When you were playing racquetball, you were highly ranked in the East Coast, and you get a chance to play, I believe it was the #1 player in the world.
Yes, Charlie Brumfield.
And you walked out on the court with him. And what was the first thing he said to you before your big match?
I walked out on, Charlie Brumfield had won the world racquetball title 8 years in a row. And now finally I get to meet him in this tournament in my own hometown. And there we are on the court, and I walk on the court, and Charlie Brumfield starts sniffing, right? He's going, and he looks at me and goes, do you smell that? And I go, what? What are you talking about? He goes, you don't smell it? I go, what? Smell what? He goes, donuts. That's how many points you're going to get. That's what he said. Talk about intimidation, right? Talk about mind games going into a big match. Well, The good news is that I got 3 points off of him. The bad news is that he kicked my ass.
In today's world, I just love that story, because back in our day, Barry, there was always some really good, fun people that played high in sports at the top of their game, and they those quick one-liners to really just set the mood, right? And oh my God, that has to be one of the best one-liners I've heard in such a long time. So
it was a great experience. But from those experiences, we also learned lessons. And when we finished, I looked at Charlie Brumfield, And I thought I was in pretty good shape. And, I didn't think that he was in any better shape than I was, at least not physically. And so after the match was over, he kidded me about the donuts and stuff. And I said, look, to be honest with you, I don't get it. Most of the people that I come up against, I can spot them 20 points in a game and I can still win. All right. I go, you kicked my ass. He goes, well, he looked at me and said, Barry, let me ask you. He goes, how much do you practice? I go, well, I'm still working full time. So, if I can get out there and practice on the weekends, I may practice for 4 hours. But during the week, when I come home from work, I'll go over to the courts, where I was the club pro, and I'll practice on my own for 2 hours. And he goes, that's all I do all day long. He goes, but I don't just practice racquetball. I practice squash. I practice badminton. I learn the games. I learn all the mental parts of it. And so he was sharing these lessons with me that are incredible because they apply whether you're playing a top-ranked professional or whether or not you're in business. All these things have relevance.
And we're going to talk about that relevance here in a minute. But let's talk about your book, TGIT, because obviously it's really the foundation of you personally and professionally. So tell us about your book and why you put it together.
Well, ever since that incident and the background, if you don't mind, Roger, I'll share the story of how I found out that I was cancer-free. Okay. Yes. So I was going, I was teaching at the University of Florida, and I had some friends who were doctors at Shands Teaching Hospital, and they were saying to me, look, Barry, there really isn't any cure. Once it's in your blood system, it's pretty much over. But, at Shands, we're doing all this research, and if you don't mind, we'd love to put you on some programs. And they go, even though chemo has never worked, what we like to do is give you a combination of chemotherapy and immunotherapy. And I said, all right, well, what does that mean? They said, well, 1 week you'll come into the doctor's office each day and we'll give you some chemo and it's going to make you horribly sick, which it did. There were times when I thought I'd rather be dead than going through the chemo, because back then they would give it to you in an IV, and within an hour, every 20 minutes later for about the next 10 hours, you're either throwing up or having dry heaves because it's killing every fast-growing cell in your body, especially your stomach lining. Sorry for the gory details. And then in the next week, what they were doing was injecting me with tuberculosis from cows. Okay, so I'm going through this, and I'm going, this can't be good. So while I'm teaching at the university and thinking that my life couldn't have been better until this diagnosis, I had my best friend in the world was my Great Dane. My Great Dane's name was Dante. And to give you an idea, I'm 6'2". My dog was as tall as me and weighed more than me. That's how big Dante was. And I also had a German Shepherd. And I lived out in the country, so I had over an acre of land that's fenced. I'd go off to the university. I'd leave them outside, 5-foot-high fences, and they were always there. Dante was such a good dog that even if I left the gate open, Dante wouldn't walk out. I came home from the university one day, and I'm looking in my fenced acre, and I see my German Shepherd, but I don't see my Great Dane. So I look for him. He's not there. He's not in the house. I'm looking everywhere. I can't find him. So I start going around the neighborhood looking for Dante. Can't find him. Get in my car, start driving around. Can't find him. That night, couldn't have felt worse. I'm angry at God. And I'm saying, I can't believe you're freaking doing this to me. I'm dying of cancer. I'm going through these horrible treatments. And now, God, you've taken my best friend from me. I mean, just it's so unfair. Why are you doing this to me? And I was very upset. Next morning, I'm supposed to go in and start another round of chemo, and at 9 o'clock, and the phone rings at 8 o'clock, and it's my doctor's nurse, and she goes, Barry, Dr. Cusimano wants to speak to you. And I go, what the? I don't need any more bad news. I mean, I don't think I can take any more. She goes, just hold on, just hold on. And he gets on the phone, and his voice is shaky, and I'm thinking, well, this can't be good. But he's basically happy because he says to me, look, I have to tell you something. A week ago, when I did all the tests, slides, the blood work, I couldn't find anything. So I sent the slides and the blood work off to this Dr. White in Philadelphia that your uncle had asked me to send it to. And so he just called me up this morning, a few minutes ago, and said he agrees with me completely. He cannot find any cancer in your blood. Slides show nothing from the last sites that we took things from. And I go, what does that mean? He goes, basically, you're cancer free. And I go, you're freaking kidding me. And he goes, no. And so I'm crying tears of happiness. He's crying tears of happiness. I get off the phone with him, and I immediately call my father, who lived in California. So it was, 8:30 Florida time, 5:30 in California. And I wake my father up, and he goes, oh, son, please, what is it now? And I go, well, Dad, I have some great news and I have some bad news. And my father says to me, okay, please tell me the good news. I need the good news first. And I tell him about the doctor call. And my dad's crying, and we're laughing and we're crying and we're happy. And he goes, son, how could there possibly be any bad news? And so I tell my father that what happened with Dante. And my father takes like this deep breath and he goes, son, I can't believe you're telling me this story. He goes, when I was in WW2, he was a master sergeant, and he was over in Europe, and he had a dog that he kept on the base with him that he had found, and he raised him and he kept him with him because he was the sergeant. Nobody's going to argue with him about that. And he goes, one day, the dog's missing. He goes, I put signs up all over the base. 2 weeks go by, I don't hear anything. One day, a private comes back from being out on missions, and he comes in, saw one of the signs, comes to me and goes, Sarge, I'm so sorry. It was a stormy night. This animal ran in front. I didn't know it was your dog, but yeah, we hit him with a Jeep and he died. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, Dad, where are you going with it? And he said, he goes, I rode home to your grandmother, his mother, and he told her about what happened with his dog and how sad he was. She wrote him back. She was from a small village in Romania, and she said to my father, Harry, I don't have to worry about you anymore. In the village that I come from, if a man has a dog and is close to that dog will give its life for him. And I wrote this in the introduction to my book. My father and I cried about it. I took deep breaths about it. And, some people I share the story with, and they go, yeah, well, it was probably just a misdiagnosis. I don't if it was a misdiagnosis, thank you, God. If it was Dante jumping over this fence and doing something he would never do and wandering off to a highway where he was killed by a trucker, and that trucker takes his name tag and calls me and tells me, and the very next morning, I get this news. My belief is that Dante gave his life for me. And, so another TGIT, thank God it's today kind of thing. And then as I got older, I was always sharing the idea of, man, to everybody, you got to enjoy today. You got to enjoy today. And as my kids got older, I wouldn't let my kids watch the news. And pretty much they would ask me, well, why? Why can't you watch the news? I go, look, Chris, it's all bad news. You can't watch it. It's not good for you. I said to them, just imagine if the front page of the Herald, which was the newspaper in Miami, if the front page of the Herald, instead of having stories about all the bad people that want notoriety by being bad, if the front page was the Herald's heroes, and that's the only thing that they would put on the front page of that paper, were stories about people that were doing good things, overcoming adversity, people that were helping people, teachers, firemen, policemen, soldiers, the whole nine yards, doctors and nurses and everybody. Imagine if they just focused on the good, then people would want to do more good. So my kids at a young age look up at me, 7 years old, 4 years old, what are you going to do about it, Dad? And I said, well, you're right. I need to, because they took me over to the refrigerator and they showed me this thing that I always have on my refrigerator. It says, be the change you want to see in the world. And they said, what are you going to do about it, Dad? And I go, from these kids, they're getting the wisdom. I love it. I send off a letter to the editor, okay, of the Herald. And I give them the whole idea. Newspapers are going to start to fade away. There's this new thing that's coming about, and why don't you be different from, better than, and make it the Herald Heroes and just publish? I think that you will become the #1 newspaper in the world. Never received a response, not a note. Thank you. Thanks for sending it. Nothing, zero. And so my kids said to me, okay, Dad, so what are you going to do about it now? So I tried again, and I went off to this newspaper in Fort Lauderdale, the Sun Sentinels, and I gave them the same speech about the Sun Sentinel superheroes. Again, zero, no response, anything. And my kids looked at me and said, so Dad, what are you going to do about it now? And I said, you're right. So that Sunday, I sat down and I wrote what I called a newsletter. Now, today, people would call it a blog or whatever you want to call it. But I wrote my first newsletter, and I titled it TGIT, Thank God It's Today. And I wrote an article based upon what I had learned about helping a client that I had go through some difficult situations. And I said to myself, well, if this client is having these problems, lots of people are. So why am I just sharing this with one person? And then the next Sunday came, and I wrote another newsletter, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And that became my first book, TGIT, Thank God It's Today.
A great story and stories. So my audience is the business community, Barry. So tell us how and what we can learn from your book and that message, Thank God It's Today, in that business community.
Absolutely. I've been fortunate enough because later on I wrote a book called Brilliant on the Basics, a playbook for business leaders, about all the stuff that I learned from all these mentors. But the one thing that I think gets overlooked too often is that we think about, and I hesitate to use the terms, it's to me, it's very easy to teach the hard skills. I can teach people about sales. I can teach people about leadership. I can teach people about company culture. But in the end, and for anybody that's listening to this, what we have to recognize is that the greatest asset that any business has are the people that work with them. And what we should be thinking of is that instead of thinking in terms of we are business to consumer, B2C, or business to business, B2B, we need to be H to H, human to human. And when I go in and I talk to the CEOs of companies, I say, look, if you're still have these organizational charts where you've got the CEO at the top, the president, the vice president, I go, you forgot one important square there. Above the CEO, you need to have the word customer. And customer, my definition of customer, means the people that you do business with and the people that work with you, because the people that work with you are also your customers. And if you take care of your customers, all right, then the shareholders will get what they need. But if the people are unhappy, or if they're disengaged, and what we've learned from recent studies that have been done by people like Adam Grant and similar people like him, we've learned that when you have a disengaged employee, somebody that's going through incredible stress, because one thing that we don't talk about, okay, is we'll talk about if we have a sprained wrist, everybody in the company will know about it. But if somebody's suffering from anxiety or depression, there's this stigma, we never talk about it. But if you have somebody that's stressed out, and certainly the pandemic has done this, when you have a stressed out employee, they become disengaged. Some people in today's world are calling it quiet quitting. But look, it's been around before the pandemic came. It's just worse now. But a disengaged employee cost a company approximately 34% of their salary. So what do we need to do as business people? I've gone into companies, and we're talking about established companies that had been all of a sudden reached their peak, stalled, and I've gone in there without getting rid of anybody doing anything, but just focusing on the people, sharing with people how to have, yes, of course, I still did all of the metrics of the basic things that, people needed to know what their job was, how to do their job, why their job matters, and how it was going to be measured. But I also made sure that they knew how to take care of themselves and the people that they worked with. I have had results with companies that have stalled where their growth in 15 months had gone up 35 to 50%. Just by taking care of the people that work with them and getting those people to have a better day every day, to take it to make the most of it. And that can be done through, I'm not saying that businesses should stop and do mindful exercises or they should do meditation. And even though I will tell you this, big companies like Apple and Google are spending a fortune on helping it be more human to human and helping the people that work with them. And so that's the business lesson that I can share. If you take care of the people that are your customers, meaning the people that work with you and the people you do business with, your business will do very well.
Well, and I'm going to give an example here. Everybody here on the podcast knows I have my executive book club that meets once a month. And this last month, we were team and Barry joined us and met, a handful of the group. And everybody gave their feedback and their personal takeaways from the book. And they all ranged from pretty much the entire book. But sitting back as a facilitator, each individual tell you their takeaways and why it really meant so much to them. But your responses are what changed the whole meeting, because we were there to talk about TGIT, and every person, maybe except for one or two, when you gave feedback, you told them about other coaches, other professionals, other books that they should read or podcasts that they should listen to. So here we were there to really get to know you, get to know more about you and your book. And all you could do all night was share other professionals that you trust, that you know and trust, and that you feel really is applicable for today. So I must have got another 15 books for our book club just from that one book club. You did not take any credit whatsoever, barely. You kept referencing other people. Why is that so important to you?
Well, somebody asked me in another podcast that I was doing recently, could I reference people that have made a difference in my life? Okay. And so I said, okay, the first would be a duo. It would be my mother and my father, all the great lessons that I learned. My father had an 8th grade education, but he had a PhD in street smarts. Okay. And I learned discipline from him. My mother was an angel. She cared about people. She taught me about kindness and compassion and caring, right? The second person that I mentioned was Wayne Dyer. And the reason that I mentioned Dr. Wayne Dyer when I was asking that was because he was the spark that got me so interested in finding other mentors. And from Wayne Dyer, I grew this incredible hunger to learn, because I believe that, part of the key to the whole TGIT and living every day is to continue to learn and grow. And I believe just like Zig Ziglar in the old days used to say, you can have anything in life that you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. So when I'm reading things and I'm learning lessons from different mentors, and every day I learn something. Today I listen to my podcast. Check this out. The podcast that I listened to was a combination on the podcast, Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, and Adam Grant. The three of them on one podcast, on Brene Brown's podcast. And to listen, it was a 2-episode one, to listen to these 3 thought leaders talk about how to have better companies, better culture, how to deal with the challenges there. We need to be open to sharing what other people are offering. Look, if we go back to the caveman, they wrote it on drawings on the wall. We all learned this from somebody, whether it was from my father, from a Wayne Dyer, from a Brene Brown, from a Mel Robbins, you name it, these people help me grow every day. And I think if I was going to give any lesson to any business leader that's out there, it's who are you reading, who are you listening to, and are you applying this stuff? Because as I say in one of my books, I say, look, knowledge is not power unless you apply it consistently, because it's all there on Google. But that doesn't give us the power. There are so many great mentors, men and women, both living and from the past, that we can learn from. And that's why I share these things with people. Why hold it back? I mean, I would love to say that everything that I've ever learned, I thought of it and this comes from BS. It's from incredible people all along the way. That continuous hunger to learn and grow. That's the key to success and happiness.
Barry, I can't thank you enough for being my guest today. I knew this was going to be just a very podcast with so much relevant information that we all need to hear. But before I let you leave, give us one more little bit of daily encouragement. Think about living each day.
Sure. Well, in almost every speech that I've ever done, and in almost every article that I write, I end it by saying the following. Remember, every day is a gift, and the quality of your life is your gift to yourself. Roger, it's always an honor and a pleasure. I appreciate our friendship.
Oh, I do the same. Thank you, Barry. Barry, how can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out and learn more from you?
Well, my first recommendation is, look, you don't have to buy my books. You know, I don't write my books to make money. I write them to share. But I put out at least one article a week on LinkedIn, and all my contact information's on LinkedIn. So if somebody wanted to reach out to me to just get one of my insights, I mean, I'm posting something at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. So that would be the best way. Or you can just go to barrygottlieb.com and my information will come up, or go to tigit.org. My tgit.org was created back in 2008. What I love about it is, yes, there is a store as one of the tabs on tgit.org. But if you buy anything in that store, 100% of the profits from those things goes to St. Jude Children's Hospital.
You're a good man, Barry. Thank you very much. And I thank you again for our friendship. And you have a very, very good day.
You do the same. Blessings.
My podcast wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for my sponsors and my great supporters. So let me take this opportunity to thank each and every one of them. First of all, I want to thank Rebecca at Custom Bookkeeping and Accounting, delivering trustworthy bookkeeping services since 2003. Dave and Dara at Virtues Matter, making this world a much happier place to be with their Virtues card apps, coaching, and workshops. Stephen at Buller Accounting, giving business owners depth and insight to their numbers. Eric and his team at Ivy Cat Web Design, the real superheroes of web development and design. Jennifer and Jean at the Seavers Real Estate Team, serving Pierce and Kitsap counties with their home buying and selling needs. Maury at the Maury Method, the world's only brainwave entrainment engineer, helping everyone have more clarity, less stress, and overall better brain health. Priya at Pivot My Profit, helping individuals and businesses have better control of their finances and more money at the end of their day. Melissa at the Soul Vibe Energy High, the queen of the aha moments, helping individuals find those holes in their cups, repair the hole, and gain back their positive energy. And finally, Rick at West Sound Recording. You talk, they do all the rest. Thank you, Rick, for all your efforts with the production and editing of my podcast.